Good evening, Deborah Rice with the late edition of ABC News. Australia's future as a car manufacturer is looking bleak. Holden is powering down after 65 years of vehicle production in the country. Nearly 3,000 directly related jobs will go by the end of 2017, but the knock-on effect threatens tens of thousands of jobs. Holden's American parent company blames a perfect storm of economic pressures.
It's the end of an Aussie icon. After fierce speculation about Holden's future, today workers were called into simultaneous meetings to be told the bad news just weeks before Christmas.
One word, gutted. That'll be it.
Yeah, it's just shattering, absolutely shattering.
In a statement, Holden's parent company, General Motors, confirmed almost 3,000 positions will be affected over the next 4 years. 1,600 jobs will be lost from South Australia's Elizabeth manufacturing plant. 1,300 positions will go from Holden's Victorian workforce. Only a sales company, National Parts Distribution Centre and Global Design Studio will remain in Australia. General Motors has blamed the high Australian dollar, the cost of production and a small domestic market.
As painful as it is to say, building cars in this country is just not sustainable.
The Victorian Premier was the first to break the news in a statement to Parliament.
This government has just been advised that General Motors Holden will be discontinuing vehicle manufacturing in Australia by 2017.
The South Australian Premier is heading to Canberra tomorrow to demand support for the workers who will lose their jobs. He says the federal government has driven Holden out of the country.
Prime Minister Tony Abbott and his government have shown a callous disregard for these workers and their families.
It's not the time to play politics. It's not the time to indulge in the blame game. It's not the time to peddle false hope.
Holden's move leaves Australia's car manufacturing industry teetering on the brink of collapse. Ford has already decided to leave, and Toyota says it needs to reassess its future. We will now work with our suppliers, key stakeholders and the government to determine our next steps and whether we can continue operating as the sole vehicle manufacturer in Australia. From 2018, Holden will become a full importer of cars, but General Motors isn't saying where the vehicles will come from. Karen Tan, ABC News.
There's more bad news on the jobs front, with 90 mine workers near Wollongong in New South Wales to be axed as Indian company Gujarat NRE battles to stay afloat. About 450 people work at the company's two Illawarra mines. They're still waiting on back pay and entitlements owed to them from earlier this year when the company first revealed it was in trouble. Workers have been told that money will be paid out in early January. But the company is now calling for 90 voluntary redundancies to keep the mines open. The Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse has heard there was a systemic failure by the Catholic Church to respond to the crime. A woman who was abused by a priest in northern New South Wales says she told several other priests about it and nothing was done. Carl Herr reports.
Jennifer Ingham endured 4 years of sexual abuse at the hands of Paul Rex Brown, a Catholic priest in Lismore. It started in 1978 when she was 16. Mrs Ingham says she finally decided to break her silence with the church at a meeting in 1990, attended by another priest, Father Frank Malkai.
Father Malkai cried and told me that he knew I was being sexually abused at the time, had been unwell with bulimia and spent time in a psychiatric hospital for it. Father Malkai also told me the names of two other girls who he knew were abused by Father Brown.
The hearing was told Father Malkai doesn't recall any such meeting. By the time she engaged with Towards Healing last year, Mrs Ingham wanted to put some questions directly to the Bishop of Lismore, but he didn't attend her meeting.
Why did nothing happen when I finally acknowledged my abuse by Brown to the church?
She recently received more than $250,000 compensation. Earlier, the current Archbishop of Brisbane became the most senior church official to give evidence at the hearing so far.
It was a searing and decisive moment for the Catholic Church in Australia, and that's the way it felt in the box.
He said whilst he didn't want to judge his predecessor, there was a drastic failure of oversight in the case of abuse victim Joan Isaacs, who says Towards Healing made her trauma worse.
It is the responsibility of the Archbishop to exercise the kind of oversight which I think was lacking in this case.
The hearing continues. Carl Herr, ABC News.
There have been emotional scenes at the unveiling of a Tasmanian memorial for forced adoptions. Thousands of people were affected by the practice, described as shameful chapter of Australia's history. The Tree of Hope sculpture is located in Hobart's Botanical Gardens. Women cried as they recounted having their babies taken from them.
Traumatic, reliving everything. Reliving the birth, reliving being drugged on a bed, not being able to see my baby.
It's just over a year since the government apologised and acknowledged the practice was illegal. The Leukaemia Foundation says a new drug will bring hope to thousands of people. A quarter of patients taking part in a trial of the drug were cured of their chronic lymphocytic leukaemia, the most common form of the disease in Australia. It's a type that was incurable until now.
Instead of having 85% disease in my bone marrow, I've got only 5% disease, which is a radical drop.
The drug could be on the shelves within 5 years. Overseas, South Africans are continuing to pay their respects to Nelson Mandela, with the former president now lying in state. His body has been carried through the streets of Pretoria to the Union buildings, where Mr Mandela was sworn in as president in 1994. The body will lie in state there before returning to the military hospital at the end of the day. The procession will be repeated for the next 2 days, with the funeral on Sunday. A cross-party US congressional committee has agreed on a new budget deal which could avoid a repeat of October's chaotic American government shutdown. The agreement finances the government for another 2 years and reduces the federal deficit by $23 billion. It also avoids automatically triggering another government shutdown, looming on the 15th of January. In sport, England has vowed to do everything it can to fight its way back from 2 down in the Ashes series. The third Ashes test starts in Perth on Friday. The tourists have Mitchell Johnson firmly in their sights as the man who's been inflicting most of the damage. The paceman has taken 17 wickets in the series so far, and there's talk he could be even more dangerous on the Wacker pitch.
Should be fast and bouncy, so that excites me a lot. It excites our fast bowlers and Nathan Lyon as well, getting some extra bounce.
Australia hopes the hot weather forecast for the test will work in its favour. A form of traditional storytelling using modern means is on show for the first time to the Australian public. The collection of Indigenous art is thought to include some of the finest and first examples of pieces crafted with contemporary materials.
Yirrkala elders flew down from Arnhem Land to Sydney to see the art of their fathers and grandfathers for the first time. The collection of 81 drawings has been locked up for nearly 70 years at the University of Western Australia.
I feel like to cry, and I think about them, what they've done, or beautiful paintings that I've seen it.
Completed in 1947, the drawings are a collaboration between anthropologists Ronald and Catherine Burnt and ceremonial leaders of Yirrkala. The Burnts applied the butcher paper and crayons, and the elders documented much of their culture and customs in these drawings. Until now, the stories have remained secret.
This is what holds me, all this art. That's my power, that's my identity.
This collection overturns the widespread belief that it was Indigenous art from Central Australia that first used Western materials. The exhibition will open in Sydney tomorrow and tour Darwin and Brisbane next year. Matthew Carney, ABC News.
And now for a look at the national weather, here's Graham Creed.
cloud across the continent is associated with a trough, but the cloud is more active through the eastern parts of Queensland. That's because there's an upper level disturbance through that region. We are likely to see more severe thunderstorms developing through Queensland during tomorrow afternoon. Across the south, relatively dry until we hit the far southeast coastline, and also through Tasmania. Another frontal system moving through that's going to see rain developing, though it will start to ease back to showers about the east coast through the afternoon, and then ease and clear through to the west and far south later in the day. We've also got very hot conditions continuing through Western Australia. Another scorcher on the way for Perth, and it just gets hotter as we move through the week. Only very isolated showers for Adelaide and Hobart, but there is a potential of severe thunderstorms in Brisbane.
And that's all from the ABC TV newsroom for now. Enjoy the rest of your evening.